Welcome back. It's time to solve some more chess puzzles, so stick with me. All right, we left off at 1548. I don't have a specific goal for this session other than to get better at tactics and to practice chess, to get better at chess. Here, my opponent is advancing a pawn. I am down an exchange. I have a bishop for a rook at some point. I can win this rook, I think. No, I can't. I was thinking I could check, but I can't check. Not just yet. I can check with the rook here on d1. Then what does that get me? King just moves out of check. If I advance this pawn, I think the opponent just takes it. Hopefully this isn't something simple that I am just missing, but I am temporarily keeping the opponent from accessing this square. One thing that I could do is advance the pawn, and then after they take it, I could check here. And then when the king moves out of check, win the rook. Does that sound reasonable? Because what other options do they have? They don't have to take it, but I think that they would. I think that they would take it just because it's free. But what else could they possibly do? Because they don't have to take it. I suppose they could come toward it in order to protect the promotion square, because right now they're not guarding the promotion square. I don't think they will take the bishop because I will take it back. And even if they do come toward it, I will still have this check, which will win the rook. So I'm going to try pushing that pawn, and we'll see if that's right. That was right. Okay, then that probably means the check is right. Okay, and then I win the rook. Okay, we figured it out, and we did it fast enough to get more than 5 points. So that sounds great. Let's go to the next puzzle. We have a knight in trouble. I'm also noticing we have a queen and a bishop kind of lining up down here, but we can't really do anything with them right now. If that knight wasn't there, this would be mate right now. But that knight is there, and I don't see an obvious way to get rid of it. I suppose, actually, maybe I do see a way. I suppose we could put the other knight in here, which aims at that knight, but also aims at the queen. So I think that would be kind of a forcing move. That would, hopefully you can't hear it, but there is a helicopter flying very low over the house right now. I'm trying to talk over it. Yeah, we have a military base not too far from here, and okay, it's passed on. Sorry about that, if you did hear it. Anyway, back to what I was saying. If I move my rearward knight, my c-file knight, into d4, threatening their queen, if they take it, then I have checkmate. If they notice that what I'm trying to do, that I'm threatening checkmate, they might not take it. They might just move their queen. But if they move their queen, then I would take their knight with check and still be threatening mate. And of course, if they do something else like take this, then I would take their queen, I think. Okay, so let me try that. That was it. Okay, and they did take that knight, so I get their queen with check. Okay, I was surprised that my opponent took the other knight, although I suppose they had to defend against mate, one way or the other. So that makes sense, and let's go to the next puzzle. I am playing with the white pieces. It looks like I'm very trapped down here in the corner. My king cannot move because of that knight. Their king has just moved out of the check that I had here. I can check with my knight. And I know that their knight hits that square, but if their knight moves... no, I was going to say their queen is hanging, but their queen is defended. So queen for queen would not be good. What else do I have? This pawn is hanging. I also don't know for sure what my opponent's next move is going to be. I could take this knight with my queen right now. And if they took back, then I could pick up the queen after this check. Because right now we are even on material. Well, I am up one pawn. If I'm counting right, I'm up one pawn. Everything else is equal. Although I probably will lose this pawn soon. So if I can go up a piece right now, that would change the course of this game. That would also free my king and so forth. So if I think that's it. I'll take the knight. If they take back, which they might not, but I assume that they would, and then I would fork the king and the queen here. What might they do besides taking back after I take the knight? That is a question. Do they have... They don't have a safe check. I would just capture there. If they didn't take back, I suppose they could just take this pawn, but then then I'm up a piece. And then I could move this rook and it would be double check. So I think I'm going to take the knight. Okay. That was it. I wasn't sure, but when you're not sure, sometimes if you can't find anything better, sometimes you just have to move. Otherwise, you sit there and stare at the board and nothing happens. And that's especially boring if you're trying to make a video. But the video here, by the way, for me, if you're new to my channel, for me, the video is secondary. Learning chess is the primary thing. So even though I do focus on the video because I don't think anything's worth doing unless it's worth doing well, I try to do the videos as well as I can with decent lighting and a clear picture and so forth. My primary goal here is to study chess. Now, their king had been checked and just moved out of check. So I was a little bit on the offensive, but do I have a good follow-up? I could check here with my queen, but that I think would just force the king to go back. We could end up with some sort of repetition of moves here, but I mean, that would be their only legal move, would be to go back, and then I would not have a good follow-up. But right now, because my queen is cutting off that square, preventing the king from going back, I could check with a pawn, say g5. That would force the king forward, because that pawn is defended by the pawn behind it, by the f pawn. And then, if the king moved forward, I could then check down here on e1, and the only legal move would be to go there, and then that would be mate. Okay, that was a 3-move mating sequence. And that puzzle does not have a theme listed here, but it was rated 1559, so about at the range I have worked my way back up to. And we have almost all the pieces on the board, but it looks like I am missing a knight relative to my opponent. My opponent has an extra knight, but that knight is serving the purpose of keeping this rook from doing anything. I am wondering if I should check, but not here because their bishop guards that square. I was thinking to check here. Then their only legal move would be to block, and that would be mate, would it not? Okay, and I saw that fast enough in order to get more than 5 points. If you do the puzzle slowly enough, you will only get 5 points. If you do it faster, you'll get more, in case you're unfamiliar with these. I think most of you are familiar with them. The idea there was to see which squares were safe to go to, I suppose. Okay, next puzzle. Also, I forgot what rating I started this puzzle, this video at. I think, was it 1548? Okay, that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, the opponent has moved here, I suppose, with the idea of threatening this rook. They want this rook to move because they have a pawn that's 2 squares from advancing. And if I move this rook and they move that pawn, that's check. So I guess I kind of see that. Do I have any checks? I do have some checks. I can check here with the knight, but their knight is guarding that square. I can check here with the knight, but their rooks are guarding that square. I can check here with the queen, protected by my pawn, by my c-pawn. Wait, is that just mate? One move checkmate. Okay, well that's why we look for checks first. As you can see, it took me too long to get that one. The target time was 15 seconds, and it took me longer than that. Okay, yeah, what we had to see was that these pawns are cutting off all the possible escape squares for the king, and that my queen would protect this pawn as well as cutting off these squares, and would itself be protected by my c-pawn. So the king was completely cut off, and my opponent had just made a nonsense move here instead of doing whatever they needed to do to avoid checkmate. Next puzzle. All right, my queen is in danger. What can I do about that? I can check, and my bishop cuts off some of these squares, and my pawn would be protected by the rook. But that would leave the king 2 different squares to escape from. If it went forward, I would have mate. If it went back, what would I have after this? If it went back, I could take that. And that's checkmate. It's not quite checkmate, because of course they can block with their queen, but my bishop is protecting that square, so it would be checkmate on the next turn. Okay, oh. Well, their pawn has a long way to go to get to promotion. If I'm counting, yeah, I'm looking at the numbers correctly. I'm moving this way, so nothing else makes sense other than to move the pawn. And if we remember the rule of the pawn square, once I move it, the pawn square will actually be right here, and their king cannot enter the pawn square on the next turn. And even if it could, my king stands in the way. However, my king can enter their pawn square, because even after their first move, I'm close enough to catch it. But I don't think I will even have to catch it, because I will win the race. I might want to move my king at some point, though, because that way I could promote with check. Although their king is going to have to get out of the way of their own pawn. So rather than moving the king, I don't know, in order to try to cut off their pawn, I think I will just move my pawn. Okay. And again, I'm going to promote before they do, because even though it looks like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, they can't move their pawn the 3rd time because their king's going to have to get out of the way. Now the question is, which way is their king going to move? But they're not going to promote with check no matter what because of where I am. So I think I just moved my pawn. Okay, now their king has moved. Okay, I kept thinking there was going to be a catch there, but it was just a matter of me winning the race, I think. I still probably, and I think many of us probably would still have trouble winning this endgame, because they're going to, I assume they're going to move their pawn on the next turn. And then we're going to want to check. I don't know if we would want to check here or here or here. And then we're going to either have to keep checking or convince their king to get in front of their own pawn. I've run into these a few times, and in a fast game like Blitz or Bullet, it can be difficult to find the right move that prevents them from promoting. And then once they promote, it's very difficult to win those. So, next puzzle. Another endgame. My rook, it looks like it's necessary to keep that pawn from promoting. Except I have checkmate. Okay, it took me a second to see that my rook would cut off the escape square and my king is cutting off the other escape squares. So that was just checkmate. Okay, and I saw it fast enough to get 13 points. Okay. My queen is undefended here. My knight will be undefended if I do something like take the queen. What, do I have anything? I can take this pawn with check and be threatening the rook. I think if I take the pawn with check, the king can't move out of check this way because of my knight. So it could only move out of check to the G file or block with the queen. I think if it blocked with the queen, I would just take the rook. And I think if the king moved over, I would just take the rook. So I think that works. Oh, it blocked way up there for some reason. Why did it block that far forward? I thought it would have blocked here in order to keep pointing at the knight and be able to come back here to block this check. But instead, it blocked way over here, so now the king has to move out of check. Huh. Interesting. Next puzzle. Yeah, sometimes the opponent makes an unexpected move. I guess just like with actual opponents. But with the computer, sometimes it's confusing because you expect, oh, that something would be their best move and they do something different. I'm not sure why, but their bishop has moved back here. I don't know what that accomplishes. Oh, maybe they're preparing checkmate. Because that's definitely checkmate if I don't keep checking the opponent. So, I have to check the opponent here. And what checks do I have? I have a check with my knight, but I think that then my opponent would just take with the pawn. But if they took with the pawn, I would have a follow-up check with my rook. Right? If I check here, they wouldn't move out of the way, would they? Because if they moved out of the way, then that would be checkmate. So I think if I check here, they have to take with the pawn. But if they do take with the pawn, I have a follow-up check here on G3 with my rook, which forces them to move out of the way. Oh, that wouldn't quite be mate because of the bishop blocking. Let me rethink that. Yeah, the king could move out of the way because if I did take the rook, the bishop would have to block that check. But that would remove the mate threat down here. I don't think it works the same way if I check here because I think in that case, the queen can recapture, protected by the rook and the pawn and protecting the rook. So I think that's probably I think that's the answer here. Let's try it. Okay, that was it, and they did take with the pawn. So to me, nothing else makes sense other than checking with the rook, which also guards against the checkmate threat here. And now when the king moves over, I have mate there. So, okay, next puzzle. I'm just about out of pieces. And so is my opponent, but my opponent has an extra pawn. They have these two connected passed pawns, 3 squares each from promotion. I can't move closer to them because these pawns guard all these squares, so I can't move my king closer to them. I also cannot, I don't think I can get them from behind. I mean, that doesn't work. I have these 3 pawns, but I can create a passed pawn of my own here. But if I do that, they don't have to take me, right? They could just check. And I can't move up because of this bishop. So if they checked, I would have to move over or back. And if I moved over, oh, they wouldn't check me again, would they? Because I could take that pawn. And if they didn't take this pawn, I would have a very close to promotion myself. If they did take that pawn, then I have another pawn very close to promotion. And I don't think it's a good idea to go toward the bishop here because it can just move easily. I think that has to be my next move. Because again, if they take with their c-pawn, I can advance my c-pawn. And if they don't take, I can keep going once I get out of the check. My knight can't do much. It looks tempting to play knight to e1 in order to attack that pawn. But that seems like a too slow of a way to attack that pawn when I can just attack it right now. Okay, that was it. They did check me. As I mentioned, I cannot move forward because of the bishop. I can't move sideways because of the bishop. I can't move here because of the other pawn. So that limits me to these 3 moves, 4 moves. I think if I move toward the bishop, that pawn can just move forward again. Right? If I go toward the bishop, that pawn moves forward. And if I go back, then this pawn moves forward to protect it. And if I take that pawn, they promote. So I think I need to get in front of this pawn. Then if they check me here, I can... if they check me with the other pawn, then I just take the h-pawn. I think. Another option would be to go all the way back, and then they can't check me on the next turn. That's one option. But I'm leaning strongly toward h7. Just because from there I am touching that square, so if they move the other pawn forward, I can take. Okay, that was it. They did move that other pawn forward. Here I think I have to take, and from there I will be guarding the g7 square. So the other pawn wouldn't push forward, because I'm pretty sure moving back is a mistake. Okay. Well, in here, I just go forward, don't I? Okay. Each one of those moves seemed fairly obvious to me. The reason that I talked them out as long as I did is because I kept looking for a catch. So many times I think, oh, well, that's the logical move. Then there's some catch, something I didn't see. So I would rather talk it out and make sure than just jump into it. Okay, we're at under 25 minutes so far. Oh, it looks like, if I remember my starting score correctly, it looks like we've gained 100 points in this puzzle. So good for me. Let's see. My opponent has just captured something here. I have a battery lined up, but I can't do a whole lot with it right now. What is... I thought about bishop to d7, which threatens this rook, but then I think the rook just moves over or something. But then if it did that, I would be getting out of the way of my rooks so that I could check. And then if the king would have two choices at that point. And I could check again, so I would have rooks here and here, and that would force the king this way, whichever square it had gone to. It would force it up to b6. But then their rook is here guarding the 6th rank. But my bishop is also guarding c6 from d6, so I could check again. And if the rook captured, I could capture with my other rook, guarded by the bishop. But that just trades a rook for a rook. And that doesn't leave us even in any way. So I am at a little bit of a loss as to what to play here. There's also this. My first instinct was d7, but what about d5? That cuts off, that still protects the c6 square, but it also cuts off some squares down there and threatens the rook, so the rook would move at that point. Again, I'm not sure exactly where, but once we got to here, I think, wouldn't we end up in the same situation? I don't know if we would or not. Let's see, if I go here and the rook moves over, and then I check, well, then the king is forced here. So that's one better thing about bishop to d5, is that it leaves the king only one option there. And so then when I check with my... Wait, I wouldn't have to check with the second rook because the bishop's guarding the corner square. I could go to the corner, and that would force the king out here immediately. I don't know. I'm going to try it because otherwise I'm going to spend too much time trying to figure out which of those is the better option. And I really don't know. But I don't see anything else that's attractive right now. I don't see any other move that really stands out or does anything. So I'm going to try bishop to e5 just because it's a little more forcing when we come down to those corner squares. Okay, that was it, and they did not move the rook. They instead went after one of mine. Okay, I understand that, because now the rook is guarding the square where I wanted to check, so I guess that makes sense. It makes sense. I think it only makes sense if there was a definite mate threat down there, because here what's going to happen is I'm going to get a rook, and when they take my rook, I'm also going to get a bishop. So I will be a piece ahead at that point. I think it has to be taking the rook and the bishop. Okay. And now if they move over, I can trade and be happy about it. Well, it wouldn't be a trade because that square would be protected. Okay. Well, we have time for at least one more. So let's do one more. See how far we can get. Okay, very interestingly, my opponent has their queen way down here. I should assume that they took one of my rooks down there on a8. And they've just gotten their knight out, which was probably a smart move to free this rook. Or it seemed like a smart move, but we do know often that the first move of a puzzle is often a blunder. So maybe what they should have done was castled here instead of getting their knight out. I can check. I can take the knight with check. I assume they would take back. And then if I took back, they would just move and their rooks would be protecting each other. But maybe it's important here to note that the knight is pinned, because that way the knight is not guarding this square. I think that might be important. That because the knight is pinned, the knight cannot guard the other squares that I can check from, like e4. What happens if I check on e4? The king has 3 choices at that point. So maybe that's not good. Maybe it would be better to take here first. But again, if I take there first, they take back. And if I capture back, they just move the king. And then the rooks are protecting each other. So it wouldn't matter that I would be also forking that rook. But I don't have a lot of other options. And I think that's part of the problem here. As far as checks go, I mean, it's just that and that, isn't it? I can take this pawn right now and be threatening the rook. That might be it. If I take the pawn, I'm threatening the rook and the knight. That might actually be better than either of the checks. Although I don't know if my opponent still has castling rights. That's one thing. If I take the pawn, they could just castle, freeing their other rook. And then the 2 rooks would protect each other. Yes, I could take the knight, but then I would have my queen and a bishop and a knight, or a queen and 2 rooks. So I would be a little further ahead in material than I am right now, because if I did this and this, I would have picked up a pawn and a knight, but I would still be way down. Okay, well, I've gone over 30 minutes now, but this puzzle is hard for me. And I think maybe it comes down to castling rights. Maybe that's what it comes down to. I don't think I can threaten this queen in any way right now. So I think my choices are either taking that pawn, taking the knight with check, in which case I would end up winning the pawn anyway, but I would have lost a bishop for it. So at least this way I don't lose the bishop. I'm going to try that. It might be wrong. Let's remember that I did make it to 1653, but it looks like I'm going to fail this puzzle. And so I'm going to drop back like 12 points. 11 points. Good guess. Okay. Well, what was the answer? Can we retry it and then have to wait for the hint button? Was it just taking the knight? Oh, it was taking the knight. And then the pawn. Okay. I had to know that it would move here. That's rotten. Why didn't it just move out of check forward to connect the rooks to protect the other rook? Okay. What they should have done here was castle. Yes, that's what I thought. But instead they moved their knight out, taking my pawn. Okay, so it says when I go here, they're going to take with the pawn, which we expected. And then I would take with my queen. But why did they go here? That's my question. Because that leaves this rook hanging. Why didn't they go here and protect the rook? Oh, because I have mate in 3 now. They can't come forward because of my queen. They have to drop back to one of these 2 squares. Okay, so if they drop back to D1, then I have this check, and that's mate. Okay, that's why they didn't bring the king forward and gave me the rook. Well, I didn't know I would have had mate in 3 if they did that, so that's why. Reset the puzzle. That's why I didn't do that plan, because you remember I thought after they took back and I took back, they would just go here and I wouldn't be able to take the rook. But if they had gone there, I would have had mate in 3. So it is taking here, and then the rook, and then the other rook. Okay. Well, Thank you for watching. Hopefully you learned something. If not, hopefully you were spotting tactics as faster than I was, or at least as fast, or you thought of an idea that I missed. If so, leave it in the comments. Either way, feel free to leave a comment. As always, I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.